The loudest person in the room isn't always the most memorable. Let's talk about the subtle power moves that actually create an it factor. Grab your cup of tea and let's dive into it. Have you wondered how Hailey Bieber was able to build a billion-dollar beauty business? It's because she has an it factor that millions around the world want to emulate. One of the founding fathers of sociology, Max Weber, defined charisma as being a characteristic that others attribute to you, meaning charisma or your it factor isn't just who you are, it's how you're perceived. So in today's episode, I'm going to be breaking down the 6 key elements that gives a personal brand an it factor. And make sure you stick around for number 5 and 6 in particular, because I do feel like they are the ones that are the most underrated when it comes to having conversations around building a personal brand that actually stands out or creating an it factor in the marketplace. Number 1, let's talk about the contrast effect, which is essentially rebellion at its best. Being the it person in the room, the it girl, the it boy, the it crowd is not about being the loudest person or being the boldest person. The it crowd does not follow trends. They are the ones who actually set the trends. They set the pace, whether it is in their community, in their industry, in their social circles. They are the taste makers. So they're not about doing what everyone else is doing. They are about going against the grain. And this is what makes them the it crowd, because they are the leaders in their space. So when it comes to building a personal brand that has an it factor, remember that this is not about increasing your intensity. We're so often told that building a personal brand is all about having a strong voice or increasing your visibility. But it's not about increasing your intensity, it is about increasing your contrast. Our brains as humans are hardwired to look for difference, to look for differentiation, to look for deviation from the patterns. And that is why people with an it factor stand out, because they create contrast in their circles. So these are people, for example, who don't dress for a trend. These are people who might actively go against a trend. Actually, they probably don't even care about the trend at all, because they have a sense of self-confidence and a self-validation that allows them to simply show up however it is that they want to show up, in whatever way that their mood takes them that day, that they want to express their personal style. They are not trying to copy what everyone else is doing. So it's their sense of confidence in their personal style that actually sets the pace for everyone else. They are the taste makers. But this does not just relate to clothes. So this can be, for example, about people who are taking their careers in a different direction to the majority of the marketplace. Again, they are setting the pace for their industry. So while other people are doubling down on the things that will potentially become redundant sometime soon, they are the ones that are future focused. They know where the marketplace is moving. This could also be, for example, people who are more focused on creating content before they consume content. So it's not that they aren't consuming content, it's that they are also the creators who, again, establish the taste in an industry that other people will eventually follow. So they aren't the ones who are going to start creating content when there is absolutely no other choice but to create content. They are the early adopters. They are the early innovators in this space. They're the ones that are setting the pace for the rest of the industry. But it also doesn't need to just relate to work either. For example, they could have more broader interests than other people. So this might be reflected in the way that they read. So while other people are reading simply bestsellers in all of the most popular categories, they might have really broad interests and read much more widely than what other people do. They could also be the people who are developing a valuable and rare combination of skills. So they're looking at what the marketplace needs or what their workplace needs, and they're asking themselves how they can build skills in those areas. So they don't just tick all of the standard boxes that a job advertisement might be asking for. They understand where that industry is going, and they are positioning themselves in a way that allows them to have an edge in the marketplace early. So let's take Hailey Bieber again, and I'm just going to use her as an example a couple times today, but the principles that we'll talk about can apply to anyone. So whether you are a male or a female, the same concepts apply. So with Hailey Bieber, for example, when she created her beauty brand, Rhode, this went against a lot of the maximalist trends at the time. So it was based on a really clean aesthetic, and it used a lot of restraint and appealed to this sense of quiet luxury in a marketplace that can often be really loud in the beauty industry. So this is the key when it comes to the contrast effect. Remember that the best design creates contrast. It's one of the basic design principles. When you create contrast in design, it means that key elements are able to pop in its space, and that is the power of adding contrast to your personal brand. It is going to help you to establish an it factor that the rest of the marketplace or the rest of your circles don't have. Number 2 is the power of mystery for an it factor. The people who have an it factor are able to just disappear whenever they want to and reappear whenever they feel like it, and often show up as this reinvented version of themselves. And they also don't have to over explain themselves whenever they do disappear, or they don't have to over explain themselves in anything that they do. They exercise this really confident power of restraint where they know that they don't owe anyone any explanations, where they're not dictated by the normal rules of the game. They set the rules of the game. They don't have to play the game by everyone else's standards. They are masters of building in silence, which is something that I love to talk about on this channel. And I talked about recently in an episode about 12 tiny power moves to build your personal brand. And this power of mystery and taking this very different approach to personal branding that doesn't require you to be the most extroverted person, to be the loudest person, to be the boldest person, but the moves that can actually have a much more meaningful impact. And there was a French philosopher and writer who, translating some of his French words, said, "The secret of being boring is to say everything." Number 3 for an it factor is the idea of thin slicing. This is essentially something that blink and you might miss it. And I'm going to talk about what that means in a second. But remember that magnetism is something that is decided upon within milliseconds. So it is something that doesn't actually need logic or proof. It's something that you feel in your gut. You know when you have a certain connection to someone. It's an energy that you pick up from them. So this is a concept that I learned about in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blink. And thin slicing is this idea that your brain has the ability to unconsciously find patterns in situations and behaviors based on very narrow slices of experience. The book, for example, tells the story of a museum in California that was looking to purchase a sculpture that was $10 million. And this was meant to be a Greek relic from ancient times. And they had a lot of top experts assess this sculpture to legitimize its authenticity because it looked so perfectly like it was from that era. But the top experts in the field were able to instantaneously detect that this was not a genuine sculpture. And they described this feeling of having instant repulsion to the sculpture, or this feeling of glass in between themselves and the sculpture. And some described feeling or hearing the instant word of freshness when they looked at the sculpture. So they had this subconscious reaction despite all of the information that they were receiving about its authenticity, that something wasn't right. It relates back to that unconscious feeling. So, when your personal brand ends up being performative, this is something that people can sense. You are creating that glass between you and the people that you are connecting with. So, when it feels like something is real, that is when it feels like it can land instantaneously. It feels like you are creating trust and creating a genuine connection with the people that you are engaging with. So, when we are talking about an it factor, we also need to talk about my point number 4, which is the halo effect. This was something that I discussed recently in my episode on an aura of confidence and what gives people a certain glow. And in it, I talked about a study from the 1920s that studied the military. And it found that the people that were perceived as having one positive trait, such as their physique or their physical appearance, were also then rated highly on other traits that were completely unrelated, like their intelligence or their leadership or their loyalty. So it showed that one positive trait or perceptions of one positive trait can have this flow on halo effect for how you are perceived. And that is what the people with the it factor have. It's that they aren't always the best at everything. It's just that there is maybe one or two or a few traits about them that creates this overall it factor for them. So, for example, if we go back to Hailey Bieber, one of her key characteristics is that she is known for being effortlessly polished. And this has flowed into a lot of her influence for the clean girl aesthetic, this very popular trend for having this more minimalist style, this clean girl look. And that created the perfect foundation for her to establish her beauty brand, to grow her beauty brand that is very much grounded in those principles as well. So she was able to take a trait that was really organic to her and build a brand around it. She created this halo effect that gave her business brand credibility. So, number 5, and this is the one that I think is so underrated and can be so lost in our modern culture, and that is the taste factor and this idea of cultural capital. So, there was a French sociologist who established this idea of cultural capital, which is essentially your invisible advantage that you gain as a result of your upbringing, of your education, of your exposure to things like language, art, and etiquette, for example. So it is those little details that can make you memorable. And this actually reminded me of my own dad who passed away a few years ago. And I remember being as young as maybe about 4 when we were in a Chinese restaurant. And he said to me, if you don't learn how to use chopsticks, I won't bring you to Chinese restaurants anymore. We won't go. And I was really fortunate to travel with my family, to dine out with my family, and to have these cultural experiences and this exposure to culture and different cultures really early. And I actually really appreciated that, and I remember it to this day every time I pick up chopsticks. And I also remember, for example, him telling me how to place your cutlery on your plate when you are in a restaurant to communicate with the waiters and the waitresses about your meal and that you have finished your meal, for example. Him and my uncles are also the reason why I so often joke about having this palate for drinks that reflects more of a baby boomer male than someone who is female and my age. And as I got older in more recent years before he passed away, a lot of our discussions started to evolve into in depth conversations about history and about world politics. And thinking about him and thinking about all of the culture that he brought into my life and that my family brought into my life really resonated when I was thinking about this idea of cultural capital. But I also believe that no matter what your upbringing, no matter who you had around you when you were younger, this is something that can also be learned. And one of the biggest ways that I personally believe that you can do that is through reading, which is why I talk about reading so much on this channel. As you would know if you follow this channel, I am an avid reader. I read 3 books a week. I cannot get enough of reading as much as I can. And in recent years, I have really broadened how much I read. So I used to just focus as much as possible on books related to business, for example, but now I read just across everything that I have an interest in. And why I think reading can be so powerful in building your cultural capital is because it expands your worldview. So it doesn't matter what your experiences have been, it means that you have the ability to create new knowledge, to build new expertise, to create new interests. And taste does not just relate to how you practice traditional etiquette or how you behave in a restaurant. It can be about how you dress, it can be about what you read, what you reference, what you talk about. It can also be about the things that you choose not to talk about. It can be about the way that you carry yourself in unfamiliar places or in different rooms, the taste that you bring to the way that you move through different environments. So I truly believe that cultural taste is one of the most underrated elements when it comes to your it factor. And it is the thing that can make you an absolute cultural powerhouse. So you can have all of the expertise in the world when it comes to your field or your industry, but it is your understanding of culture and where that fits into a bigger picture or how that fits in social everyday interactions that is really going to give you that invisible edge for your it factor. And my point number 6 is also one that I think is so underrated, and that is that people with an it factor wear their beliefs on their sleeve. Having an it factor, as I've said, is not just about what you wear, what you say, or how you move. It's also about what you believe and communicating what you believe to connect with your people. So if you take the Biebers, for example, they're well known for their Christian faith, and identifying with that belief is something that, despite how popular the Christian religion is in the world, goes against a lot of the Hollywood culture that they are surrounded by. So it creates that contrast effect. They stand out, but it also shows that they believe in something greater than what it is that we see as a superficial it factor. They are driven by something else. And this is where people with an it factor really do stand out, because they are completely unbothered by the approvals of other people. They understand their beliefs, they know their beliefs, and they are willing to put those beliefs above anything else, because their validation doesn't come from other people's approvals, it comes from within. Thanks so much. Subscribe for more like this, and I'll see you in the next episode.